Hi everybody, I'm Paul Kedrosky. Thanks Johnny for the intro. Welcome to Money Tech here in New York. I know this is early for many of you or late for others depending on where you're coming from, so I'm just delighted you could all make it here. I'm not going to spend too much time on setup because we want to get right into the event, and I'll talk a little bit more later in the morning about some of the logistics with respect to lunch and other things. But again, let me just say thanks for coming to this. This is really our first Money Tech conference, and the intent here really is to bring together some different audiences from finance and technology and talk about some of the interesting things going on at the confluence of finance and technology. And nobody better to talk about that than the founder and CEO of O'Reilly Media, Tim O'Reilly. And I'll invite Tim up to get us started.
Hi there. So, how many of you here use O'Reilly books? Okay, some number of you are techies. So at O'Reilly, we started out as a book publisher, got into conferences and online publishing and various other things. But the heart of what we do is technology activism. And a lot of what that depends on is pattern recognition. So I'm going to tell you a bit of a story, first of all, about how I got to the ideas of Web 2.0, which have, I think had fair impact on the world of technology, but also then how I got from Web 2.0 to start thinking about financial markets and the rationale for this conference. But I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about just what is Web 2.0. A lot of people, have heard the term. They heard a lot of the rhetoric about it, but I don't think that at least what I understood when I first kind of came up with the idea has really penetrated for a lot of people. So I want to set the stage for today's conference by talking a little bit about that. So first off, you guys have heard about all the sharing, openness, user-generated content, social networks, right? We might as well throw in peace and love. That's what Web 2.0 is all about, right? This is Web 2.0. I actually don't think that at all. I think blogging, social networks, all that kind of stuff is just out of form. Okay, what really matters is something I call harnessing collective intelligence. That is, every true Web 2.0 company is building a database whose value grows in proportion to the number of participants. And it's actually creating a network effects-driven data lock-in with accelerating returns to the winners. That's the heart of Web 2.0. And Greg Papadopoulos, the CTO at Sun, calls this red shift. As companies that kind of find the secret formula actually accelerate away from their competitors. You can kind of see their MySpace, Facebook, YouTube. You kind of see the trajectory that they have all taken. And those of us in the Web 2.0 business, when we see a new startup, we immediately go look at its traffic trend graph. If it doesn't have that up and to the right character, you go, oh, they haven't hit the secret sauce. Because what's underneath that trend graph, of course, is that somebody has virality, but then they're starting to really accumulate those network effects so that the service is actually getting better because there are more people connected to it, and therefore more people join as this virtuous circle. So thinking about this, I actually started with open source. And before I started calling it Web 2.0, I was calling it the open source paradigm shift. And there's a reason for that. And I want to ask, first off, how many of you in the audience use Linux? Okay. So it still hasn't completely penetrated. Because my next question is, how many of you use Google? Okay. So you're still thinking of Linux as an operating system that runs on a computer that's sitting in front of you. Well, in fact, Google is the most powerful, successful Linux application. So I started thinking very early on from my activism about open source about just what did it mean that open source was the heart of what was happening on the web. And in particular, I thought a lot about the application stack that we all become familiar with on the PC, in which we all kind of accepted that there was sort of this sort of monopoly at the bottom of the stack with hardware lock-in by people like Intel. We had this commodity platform where the PC was assembled out of standardized components, and then we had proprietary lock-in at the top. And most of the people talking about open source imagine that what they were trying to do was to build a world that looks like this second picture. Okay, microprocessors are hard. We're not going to go there yet, although Sun has since introduced open source with OpenSpark. at that hardware layer. They liked cheap commodity PCs, but they thought, oh, we're going to knock out Microsoft with Linux and OpenOffice and so on. And that was the picture of the world. But what I realized that the world we were building actually looked like this. It was the same kind of stack with proprietary at the bottom and the top. And what was being commoditized was software. Okay, so instead of seeing this as a world of Linux replacing Windows, we needed to start to think of Red Hat as equivalent to Dell, assembling commodity components into a kind of software stack. But of course, what I noticed was that various kinds of new companies, proprietary software as a service companies, were appearing up the stack, Google being the most powerful. They build on top of open source, but they actually are building this proprietary, very powerful database. What's more, down below in many of these applications, there's somebody who's assembled a mass of data that other people rely on, and that gives you kind of a subsystem level lock-in. So that thinking about open source led me to Web 2.0. And somewhere along the way, I came across Clayton Christensen's wonderful law of conservation of attractive profits. He said when attractive profits disappear at one stage in the value chain because a product becomes modular and commoditized, the opportunity to earn attractive profits with proprietary products will usually emerge at an adjacent stage. He wrote that in the Harvard Business Review in February 2004. And so that's the heart of what's been happening with Web 2.0. It appears to be about openness. It appears to be about everybody participating. And yes, in fact, those things are drivers. But the business advantage goes to people who then harness that, and they're ending up building these proprietary databases that give them competitive advantage. So when you hear the term Web 2.0, don't think Ajax, don't think blogs and wikis and mashups. Think systems that harness network effects so that the systems get better the more people use them. So just a quick run through of that. If you think about Google, every time somebody makes a web link, they're contributing to Google. But more importantly, Google's ad auction has this network effect, winner takes all characteristic where there are more ads, it's a better auction, and therefore more people come to the auction, so it gets better results, so on and so forth. And that's why you see Google continuing to increase their dominance in search advertising despite all the efforts of Yahoo and Microsoft. eBay, obvious case, a lot of people have tried to get into the auction business. Critical mass of buyers and sellers makes it very hard for others to enter the market. Amazon, they've got more than 10 million user reviews, it's probably 15 by now. Craigslist, self-service, big part of that. Users do all the work. You hear stories about Craigslist, I think have something like 22 employees. Wikipedia has 6 employees, so they're building top websites totally with this user-generated content. But what's driving that is the fact that they actually are ending up with this self-reinforcing data system. Same thing you see with a system like YouTube. So there's another element I want to bring out, though, and that is that Web 2.0 is a kind of bionic software. You guys probably remember that TV show. Some of you may be old enough to remember the $6 Million Man, the hybrid of man and machine. But when you look at a Web 2.0 feature like the tag cloud, which Flickr popularized, this is a user interface element that's generated dynamically by the interactions of millions of users. You go to that tag cloud on any particular day, and this is what everybody using Flickr has tagged on their photos that day. The human is in the machine. And I think if you think about PageRank, it's the same thing. We're making links. Google is harnessing and studying and gathering the data that we're contributing. We are in their machine, in their application. So it's not just about code or even algorithms. It's about finding meaning in the new flood of user-generated data and turning that meaning into real-time user-facing services. If you think about, say, a bank or a phone company, they also have this, potentially have this characteristic. They have all this data being generated by their users. In fact, there are startups like Wasabi, who we have presenting here today, I'm an investor in, that's sort of gathering through a Quicken-like application,